Hi, thanks for joining me today. I have two special guests, John Richardson and Keith Redmond, both global advocates for Americans overseas, who we are trying to get this tax code to make a little bit more sense. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. We have a few updates on the territorial tax jurisdiction proposals that are headed to Congress. Thank you for joining me today. So, John, we have some interesting things going on. We were promised a territorial tax for individuals back with tax reform, and what we got was a little bit different, some nasty surprises, and a little bit different. I mean, the complete opposite. And what would you say kind of happened in tax reform with TTFI? How would you explain it?
Well, I would explain it very simply that the interests of individual Americans abroad were simply not considered, period. I don't think it's any more complex than that. So indifference being, of course, the worst form of abuse. So they began by not considering Americans abroad and then enacted some incredibly unanticipated, complex tax reforms that have affected Americans abroad so negatively that for those who've been sitting on the fence about whether to renounce U.S. citizenship, I think it's sort of removed all doubt. One of them would be, of course, this transition tax thing, which affects many Americans abroad who are the shareholders of small foreign businesses, meaning non-U.S. businesses. Without getting into the details, it's a way of punishing them retrospectively. And then in addition to that, they included a new provision called, I suppose appropriately, the greatest Freudian slip of all time, guilty, which would punish them prospectively. So they didn't consider them, but they enacted laws which punish American abroad for their past and make their future as Americans abroad impossible, basically ensuring that, what's that saying, all roads lead to renunciation.
That's unfortunate. Now, Keith, what exactly is going on with the TTFI proposal? Or maybe you don't have the exacts, but can you give us a general idea? And is there any hope for people? Is there any hope out there that we might be able to undo some of this nastiness?
Yes, there definitely is hope for people with the TTFI proposal. Right now, it is running its course, going through the process in preparation of the bill that will be introduced by George Holding. It should be introduced come September to Congress. Now, the bill is going to give relief for current Americans overseas and certainly for future Americans overseas. Now, is it going to be a perfect bill? No, but it's going to be the best bill that we can have in regards to taxation relief for Americans overseas. It's been a long time coming. We've come a long way over these past years in pushing for our rights, again, as Americans overseas.
All right, so there's hope. So what we're trying to do is get to that territorial system, because right now, as U.S. persons, you're taxed on your worldwide income no matter where in the world you are. It'd be a lot simpler if you were only taxed if you were actually in somewhere in the U.S., and it is sort of the way the rest of the world does it. We are an outlier. And not only that, not only are we taxed, the compliance burden, and if you've listened to this channel for a while, or if you are an expatriate yourself in compliance, you know that you pay thousands of dollars each year for tax compliance. And the fact is, you might actually not owe all that much to the IRS. And so, as John has said before, that one of the biggest victims of this whole regime is the IRS itself, because of the complexities and the difficulties in administering it. Now, John, are there some proposals in Canada to limit the damage of the territorial system as it is now?
I'm sorry, your question is, are there proposals in Canada?
Yes.
You mean originating from Canadians,
yes,
or proposals that
yes.
would affect Canadians?
No, are there any proposals in Canada that would limit the current state of territorial taxation, or is that more of a FATCA issue?
No. I mean, the message from the government of Canada has been that the United States has the sovereign right to impose taxation any way it sees fit on U.S. citizens. The problem with it, of course, is that, what they're really saying is that they recognize the sovereign right of the United States to impose taxation on Canadian citizens and residents according to U.S. tax rules. Which is the problem.
Okay.
And Canada has to fight back on this. All individual countries need to fight back. I mean, the notion that the United States can impose worldwide taxation on people who have tax residency in other countries is ridiculous.
Absolutely. Yeah, Keith, now, is there anything going on in Europe that you know of?
Yeah, I think conversely, in Europe, originating in France, and now up at the EU level, is that they are starting to see that the U.S. imposing its tax code on tax residents of European Union nationals who live in Europe is not going to work. And there is going to be a mission, if you will, a delegation of French and European EU, delegates, at the loss of any other term, going to Washington again in September to address this issue. They're going to address the issue of the taxation being imposed on these nationals, and that it's got to stop. This is not going to work moving forward. And this has originated from the hard work of Fabien Lahagre in France and his association, initially dealing with, obviously, the accidental American situation, but it really has expanded in taking a look at the U.S. imposing its tax code on tax residents in the EU. That's the bottom line. So there is much more of a pushback and much more support in Europe in regards to addressing this, which is a good thing.
Yeah, that sounds like a pretty powerful punch to bring into it, because if this bill is going to be coming around in sometime in September, and then we're also getting some fantastic representation from these foreign countries in D.C., that's going to be really, really helpful. And maybe some of our viewers wouldn't mind calling their own country to say, hey, are we really pushing back in the way that we should be? Because I do think, as we've talked about this over the years, we've noticed that, no one really is willing to push back, and so they don't even know what's possible. If you just accept everything the U.S. government demands you to do, well, you're going to do everything they demand you to do. But if you just try pushing back every now and then, you might find a better deal is out there. Because as we look at this, and I think this will kind of flow into the next question that I have for both of you, the current problems with what I would call are still a citizens-based taxation. We don't have a TTFI. We really don't. It's a citizenship-based taxation. So, John and Keith, the questions for both of you. What are the key problems right now with our current, there's a lot of problems. So why don't you limit it to one? What's the biggest problem that you see with citizenship-based taxation? John, why don't you go first?
Thank you for that, Anthony. The biggest problem is that with citizenship taxation is that it's based on the fiction that people actually live in the United States when they don't, and that the assets that are local to them where they live are actually foreign to the United States, which basically guarantees that every aspect of their life is subject to punitive taxation and reporting, a very large part of which cannot even be offset through foreign tax credits, meaning it guarantees double taxation.
Yeah. Keith, what do you say?
And just to add on to what John said, and he made a very good point with his last sentence, there is a big myth out there that these tax treaties with the U.S. eliminate double taxation.
Oh, God, no.
They do not.
No.
I deal with people, as you do, as John does, all the time, with many examples where double taxation is in play.
Oh, yeah.
I do know, in particular in France, it is in play. There are certain taxes which are not recognized by the IRS. There are certain investment tools, which are normal investment tools, that a homeland American would do in the United States, that someone living in France would do in France, that are not recognized by the IRS, and they're tax going into the investment and by the U.S. and then tax coming out of the investment by France. And again, it's double taxation. And I think one clarification on the citizenship taxation, Now we have a two-tiered system. We have now territorial taxation for corporations in play, but we still have the citizenship taxation for individuals which are in play. Hence the reason for this TTFI, to have everything come together in one type of taxation process.
Yeah, that's right. Tax reform did deliver a territorial system for corporations. It was the individuals, the people who don't have typically have the deep pockets to deal with the compliance burdens, and the staff to plan things and have the flexibility to avoid the double taxation. That certainly happens a lot.
Yeah, and I think it's important, Anthony, because you do talk about compliance burdens, and especially for people who will be listening to this podcast who may be living in the United States and have not had the opportunity, if you will, living outside the borders of the U.S. The compliance burden is exorbitant as compared to a homeland American compliance, quote-unquote, burden in the U.S. And I think that's something important that needs to be stressed.
It is absolutely, and I would say for those who aren't overseas themselves, yeah, you could have your children, your adult child could get an opportunity in Hong Kong, and they might be telling you one day to say, I just got my taxes done, and the CPA charged me $6,000. Does that sound right to you? And of course, no, that can't be right. But actually, when you do have, if you have a few foreign trusts, which could just basically be a foreign pension, you have an interest in a controlled foreign corporation, which is just a business, that you could absolutely see a $6,000 tax preparation bill for a completely middle-class person. I mean, middle-class every which way.
And remember, it's a foreign trust for the United States, but it's a local trust and a local pension for that American overseas living in Hong Kong. It's their local investment.
Right. You're right. It is pretty. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that need to be fixed. So we have a lot of listeners, a lot of viewers who want to know how to help. So gentlemen, I know there's an event coming up. John, can you talk about an event coming up in Canada? What's that about?
Yeah, just before I get to that, though, I just want to make one add to something that Keith was saying about the treaty. Not only Keith was making the point that a lot of people believe the tax treaty prevents double taxation. Actually, these U.S. tax treaties contain something called a savings clause, which means that individuals in general are not presumed to get the benefits of the tax treaty. So, in my view, the real effect of the tax treaty is to guarantee double taxation. Because it guarantees that any U.S. citizen living in a country where there's a tax treaty has to be subject to the Internal Revenue Code. So, was it Sorensen who wrote the great speech where he said, the great enemy of the truth is not the lie. The great enemy of the truth is actually the myth. It is a myth that tax treaties are there to prevent double taxation. No, they're there to guarantee double taxation. But on your other question about the event, yes. So Solomon Yu, who has been a tenacious advocate for getting tax reform for individuals, moving to something that's analogous to the territorial taxation for corporations, is actually doing a series of information events at American Chambers of Commerce really around the world, starting in Canada this Thursday evening, August the 16th. He'll be speaking. There will be a couple of other speakers as well. It's organized by the American Chamber of Commerce, and I think it's a great event for people to come to who want to learn more about this. He'll be unveiling more of the contents of what this new law is designed to look like, and basically anybody who's interested can either just Google American Chamber of Commerce Solomon Yu, August 16th, Toronto, or it's on my site, citizenshipsolutions.ca, and I presume it will be on your site, Anthony, when this blog post goes up as well.
Right.
And Keith, I think, has got it on his various Facebook groups, but, this is a great opportunity. And it won't be the only opportunity because Solomon will then be moving to London, Paris, Frankfurt, Berlin, and I think Rome, all within a period of a couple of weeks in September. So this is a great opportunity to attend some of these things wherever you may be in the world. And we're going to make an effort to get the event in Toronto on this Thursday videoed, which presumably will be available as well.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, I'm looking at the webpage right now. So this Thursday, St. Michael's College in Toronto. If you're in the neighborhood, definitely stop by there. That looks pretty good. And then,
I can give you the address. So it's the University of Toronto, St. Michael's College. The building is called Alumni Hall. The street address is 121 St. Joseph Street. It's room 400, which is on the 4th floor. I think pre-registration is supposed to be required through the American Chamber of Commerce, but hey, if you just show up and ask for me, I'll be there. I'll make sure that you'll be able to get in regardless.
Oh, we have quite a few fans on our channel, by the way, John. So I am sure there's going to be a few people taking you up on that. I'm sure lots of people.
No, that's great, absolutely. Yeah. And your channel is doing a socially a very good thing, Anthony.
Well, thank you very much, John. It means a lot coming from you.
And I certainly would like to add to what John was saying, is that in regards to Solomon Yu, he has been a tireless, and I mean this sincerely because I have worked with him and witnessed this, a tireless advocate when it comes to getting change done on the taxation issue for Americans overseas. Yeah. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And here is the thing. Yes, for full disclosure, he is the head or co-head of Republicans Overseas. However, we have the support and the hard works of ACA, American Citizens Abroad, and the participation of ARO, the Association of Americans Resident Overseas. And we've had Democrats abroad who have assisted in this matter. And the reason why? Because this has nothing to do with how one believes politically. This has to do with the situation all Americans overseas are in. Full stop.
That's right.
This is an totally American overseas issue. I mean, absolutely.
Yeah. It's not a Democratic issue or a Republican issue. It's an issue of just simple justice, or in this case, injustice. But Keith, if I can just add something here.
Please.
I fully agree with what you said about Solomon. And, he's been a tireless, tenacious advocate. He is, I think, the most visible advocate. But to be clear, there have been a lot of people, who've been working very hard on this. There's Charles Bruce of American Citizens Abroad, Jackie Boongyang, formerly of Americans. I mean, these people have done incredible work over the years. I mean, certainly, your own efforts. So this has been, the result of the efforts of an awful lot of people, who've worked tirelessly.
And we have
actually, it's not
Karen
even an
Alford
awful
in
lot.
Australia.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely, Karen Alford in Australia. It's funny, there aren't actually a lot, okay, but it's been a small number who've worked very, very hard. So it's the efforts of a lot of people, and these people who try to paint this as a partisan. How in the world can a 150-year-old tax law be considered to be a partisan issue? I mean, there's dumb and outright ridiculously dumb. This is an issue that affects everybody, and it affects primarily the citizens and residents of other countries, and it is going to be changed. The only question is whether it's changed now or whether it's changed down the road. But, in the history of taxation, as Charles Adams, the great tax historian, wrote the book, where he convincingly made the argument that, that civilizations rise and fall, that as go their tax laws, so go civilizations. And I think that you're looking at a pivotal moment in American history because of its tax laws in general.
That's about right.
And I think it's important for, one of the, certainly for this, but thank you again, Anthony, for this podcast, because it's important that Americans overseas get involved and stand up for their rights. And even if it's just a minimal, contacting their representative in the United States, contacting their 2 senators in the United States, and not just contacting them once. Follow up with them after they send an email. If they get a boilerplate response back, get on the phone and explain to them the situation. Explain to them, because a lot of the times they don't, the representatives or the staff don't understand the way the U.S. taxes, and they need to be informed and educated on this on a consistent basis. I mean, we have an example, and we've done this on a previous podcast, Anthony, a couple of weeks ago with Suzanne Herman, where she has developed a very good relationship with her congressman's office. And as a result, things are moving, and she's being heard, and other people are being heard. And she brought me into the fold because of the hard work she's done. So that way the voice can go out even that much stronger. So I highly encourage every American overseas to do something positive. It's okay to complain, but complaining without action is definitely not going to go anywhere. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, and I would just add,
opportunity now to move forward.
Yeah, Keith, and I would just add on, if you are looking to get involved and, maybe you never really called anyone before, you're just a little intimidated about it, and you could be in a different time zone too, chances are you are, you know what, why don't you start off with sending an email? Just send an email, explain what's going on, and I think what's going to happen is once you get that boilerplate email back, you're probably going to feel a few emotions that may, trigger you to, why don't I give a call? Why don't I give a call back? So that's for everybody. You can give an email right now. Let's look up your rep. Where was the last place you lived in the U.S.? Okay, find your rep there. Send an email right now.
Yeah. And also for Americans overseas who have not lived in the United States, they can use the last residence of their parents or their
Okay, great. Yeah, right. Some never lived in here. Right. So good point, Keith. Thank you. Yeah. So there's no reason why anyone right now who's if you're angry about this, there's no reason why you can't take action right now. You don't have to call. Just send an email and say, hey, look, this is my story. See what they say back. And that is a way, I am sure we have every representative has quite a few expats as their constituency. They're supposed to represent you. Make sure they do. Send that email right now. By the way, I just want to I want to thank you guys.
I was just going to ask you.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to, forgive me, Anthony. I just wanted to ask John if he had anything to add to what I just said or even reemphasize that it's really important for Americans overseas to get involved.
Well, I certainly agree with you on that. I think that it doesn't mean necessarily in the same way, but I think that everybody has to get involved. But let me tell you one way that people can get involved that maybe isn't quite as clear. And that is that, there's a number of people, because of the pain and disappointment over the years, who seem to spend a lot of time saying, oh, this will never change, which has the effect of, sort of diminishing the efforts of those who are doing a lot of work. And I think that kind of talk has really got to stop.
Yeah.
Because if you're walking around saying that this is not possible, this is never going to change, it can only change in a certain way, then I think you're actually harming the ability of the people who are trying to get something done. And you're also, I think, in a subtle way, discouraging people from contacting their member of Congress and that sort of thing. So I think the message should be step up and do what you can. And if you're not going to step up and do what you can, shut up and get out of the way.
There you go.
I'm sorry to be so blunt.
That's exactly, John. I think that's exactly right.
I've been involved in this for the number of years that I have. And I think this is true of anybody who's been involved. And, no use for people who navel gaze and just say this can't be done.
And I also think you're not paying attention. If you don't think this can be done, you're not paying attention. Regardless of what your political affiliation has been, would you not say some remarkable things have happened over the last, 15 years? Some very unlikely things have happened. So to say something is impossible when it comes to writing of a law that human beings write just doesn't make sense to me. That some of these things that have occurred, no one would ever take you up on a bet on that at the most unlikely odds. So I just think you're not paying attention, and I agree. If you're not going to help, shut up, because we just need people who can help and take some action. And you have to use the feelings that you're having right now and send an email, take that action, talk to other people to say, here's what you can do. And we have to stay positive, and it's achievable. It's completely achievable. Look, the law was put into place by the same people we just want it gone. How could that be impossible? That doesn't make sense to me.
It's not impossible. Obviously, it can be done. The only thing we're betting on is time. Okay, this will change. At this particular juncture, because of the efforts the cumulative efforts of a number of people, coupled with the fact that the tax reform is still going on. I mean, this is the best opportunity to get change that has ever existed. And it's actually better than it was a year ago. I mean, people say they were disappointed that there was no relief for Americans abroad a year ago, but actually there's a much, much better chance this time for a simple reason. This time, Congressman Holding is apparently introducing a standalone bill. In other words, that will force people to actually think about this particular issue. In the context of overall tax reform a year ago, my sort of sense of it is that there was just too much else going on for people to concentrate on this. The problem here is indifference. It's not some kind of maliciousness. I mean, most Americans and most people in Congress don't even understand how the tax code works well enough for them to be malicious. So it's indifference primarily. And the first step in dealing with indifference is to create a situation where people have to actually look at the situation. Yeah. And with a standalone bill introduced by Congressman Holding, well, I mean, what better instance would there be if they're having to look at the situation?
Oh, that's what I didn't know that. I did not know that part, because usually these bills are stuck into another bill, and people could say, well, I was really voting on this part of the bill, not really that bill. It allows for Congress people to kind of avoid a direct accountability to it. So a standalone is fantastic. And people really,
and that's my understanding. It'd be good to get Solomon to confirm that, but that's what I've understood, and I have every reason to believe that's true. And this is why I want to make this point again for people who are listening. This is why this is significantly different from a year ago. It's one thing to try to get this issue. Imagine that you've got 100 people trying to get on a bus, and only a certain number of people can get on the bus. It's not like anybody's putting a lot of attention into any of those individuals, just getting the 100 on the bus. But here, if it's a standalone bill, there's only going to be a smaller number of people on the bus, and they're definitely, and put it this way, the bus drivers will know that these people are on the bus. So, I think you got to be optimistic, because there's no point in being anything else. Yep. But I think that there are very, very strong objective grounds for seeing this as very different from the situation a year ago.
Absolutely.
I agree. All right.
Absolutely. John and I have been at a meeting in Washington collectively with Solomon, with Charles Bruce and Mary Louise Serrato with ACA, American Citizens Abroad, with Kathleen Mystery of Association of Americans Residents Overseas. And, we've come together to work on putting together a TTFI bill. This was not even
don't forget Jim Gossard
a year ago.
Oh, yeah, Jim. Yep.
Jim Gossard. Yep. Yes. Absolutely.
Very
Jim
important.
Gossard, who was also with RO. This would not have happened or even been imaginable a year ago at all.
That's true.
So these are some big strides.
Yeah, there's an incredible team working, and it's just been amazing to be a part of it myself. Just the people I've met who've worked in, when I have guests on, it's all different time zones. People are calling in at all different times because they feel that strongly about that, and everyone's, so many people are sacrificing. I can't see how we're not going to win. I think we're going to win if we do what we have control over. We will win, and we will get this passed, along with the repeal of FACA. So, guys, what do you think there is the event coming up in Canada. So, if you are in Toronto or the surrounding area, definitely get there on this Thursday. We will have some updates coming up soon. And gentlemen, what do you think? And we will try to get Solomon on. He's so busy; he's always traveling all the time. And there's somebody who will talk to me at any time. He's talking to me at 2:00 in the morning a lot of times when he's a guest, and he'll just he's just working constantly on this, and he's a pretty smart guy. So we're really, really blessed to have such a strong team. Our next step, our next update on this. When do you think that's going to be, guys?
Ooh.
Well, I would think the next update is when we see what the actual text of the proposed legislation is.
Okay.
Right. And I'm thinking probably, John, at the end of August, beginning of September, after the Congress resolves.
Probably something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. So then what
you know, and imagine, can you just imagine, you know, actually having, you know, a proposed piece of legislation written in, you know, legislative format? I mean, you know, this really has come a long way.
Yeah.
I don't think 3 or 4 years ago, I mean, I think one could have imagined this, but, you know, we're there. We're there. At least the legislative proposal is going to happen. Now, whether we get it through or not, you know,
yeah, I would even say, just getting the legislative proposal is something I don't think would have been possible. If you asked me 3 years ago, I would say, no, that's never going to happen. Never. So just the fact that we are getting, there's a chance that we'll get a standalone bill. That's incredible. So what we'll do, this is what I'll recommend.
Incredible.
So again, follow these links, email, call whatever your representatives, subscribe to this channel because we'll be doing an update on a couple weeks when the text of the bill comes out. We'll meet again. And then I know that there should be another repeal FATCA hearing, and I'm sure there's going to be a TTFI hearing, and we'll be covering that. I'll see some of you in Washington, D.C. for that. I'm not going to miss that. And I'm sure John and Keith will try their... We'll be there too.
And that'll be an update on another podcast.
Yeah, that'll be an update
and I
too.
think it'll be important. Along with all the information, it'll be important for people who want to connect with John to put up his website address, and people who want to connect with the group I manage to put up the American Expatriates address.
Yep, I will do that. All right, fantastic.
That way people can make sure they have the most current information possible and to see how they can also get involved on a consistent basis.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that's it. Thank you so much for joining us today. John and Keith, always a pleasure. This is Anthony Parent of Parent & Parent LLP, Iris Medic. Thanks for watching.